yeah, you should. We're going to have a really good dinner, too. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. It's a place called Easy Bistro. It's really good. It's Kelly approved. Don't worry.
Is that the criteria?
Yes. Yes.
That's why we put her.
It is. It's a high bar.
Okay. Very high. Well, that's who you, you don't want the person that's like, Taco Bell?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I do love Taco Bell.
Yeah.
I'm going to wait like one more minute and then we'll start. It is recording us, but not our voices unless you talk into the microphone right now, just so you know. It started at 5:30, the recording. It's recording somewhere up there. So, yeah, it's a live stream, so whatever you say, they will hear or see. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. My name is Ann Catherine Taylor. I'm the Director of College Counseling. And in a second, we will introduce our lovely admissions professionals who are up here. Sorry if I don't spill my water. And I want to say hello to everyone who is joining us online. As you know, we're a boarding school, so we have a lot of parents who are joining us online. So thank you all for attending our live stream. And I just want to say thank you for coming. I know that college admissions is a hot topic, and it's probably something that brings a lot of stress into your life right now. And we are creating this program and bringing these experts from the field here to hopefully alleviate some of that stress. We want you to leave this program tonight full of energy and excitement and just being ready to dive into your own son or daughter's college search. And we hope that you leave with a lot of answers and probably a lot of questions too. And you are more than welcome to contact your college counselor with your questions. We're excited to start our individual college meetings with your kids starting in January, so that'll be really fun. And we just wanted to have this opportunity a little bit earlier than we have in the past, just so you can really kind of go into the break with a really good idea of what you should be doing right now and just kind of a good kickoff. So, and I apologize, I am under the weather tonight, so I'm going to turn this over to Meg Connor, who is going to lead our parent panel. And here she is.
Okay, well, I thought we would start off by introducing our fine panelists. So if y'all could just go down, say your name and where you're from, that would be great.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah Bombard, and I am with Lehigh University. We're a medium-sized research university in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Good evening, everyone. Cornell Hussein, Vice President for Enrollment, College of the Holy Cross in Massachusetts. If you've not been, you should try to make your way out there at some point. Second largest city in New England.
Hi, good evening. My name is Megan Starling. I am the Director of Admission at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, a national college of the liberal arts and sciences right here in our home state.
Good evening, everyone. Clay Alexander. I'm up the road at Knoxville, at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I'm the Director of First Year Recruitment, and we're your state's public flagship and land-grant institution.
Hey folks, Chris Pinto. I serve as Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, just about 90 minutes away from here.
Okay, so to start off, as you can hear, they come from a variety of different institutions, and they have all worked in admissions for a very long time. So I would just love for y'all to share how you have seen the admissions landscape change specifically over the last few years.
We were joking about this earlier. Some of you may
might
have
be the
heard
whole
us,
panel.
where we say what has stayed the same is probably a better question for a panel that has a set duration. I mean, so much. I applied to 3 colleges when I applied to college. Testing, essays, stress.
Virtual visits, the ability to learn about campuses without having to physically go there and the resources that are available. I think testing landscape has been a really, really big one. What else would you all add?
I'd say it's just what we call like the funnel. There are more applications than there were 5 years ago, but there are fewer students actually going to college. So more students are submitting applications, and a lot of implications for that. It's more competitive, more processing on our side. That's a big difference.
I would just add that I think for students in particular, but I would also say parents, someone who's recently gone through this process with a young person, just a level of pressure on students. And so whenever I give talks, I'll typically start by saying, by show of hands, how many people feel like, there are unrealistic expectations. And the majority of students are raising their hands. But what I'm also seeing is that parents are also raising their hands. And one of the comments that was just made, while we're seeing these wild increases in applications over the years, we're not necessarily seeing, more students. We're seeing more students apply to more schools because you all are feeling like, wow, it's so selective to get into schools. We should apply to more. The reality is that maybe you shouldn't apply to more. It's a matter of working with your amazing counseling staff to help guide you into the right type of places. But I would argue the pressure has changed in ways that I don't think is actually as healthy as we'd want it to be.
I'd also say, especially in the last cycle and currently financial aid, we have seen the simplification of the FAFSA. Hopefully by next year we'll be back on a totally normal timeline. But as I think pressure has increased, the cost of education continues to rise. And I think in my 16 years, we are having more and more conversations about the cost of education, financial aid, merit scholarships, money, accessing the money has changed, and the importance of colleges providing that financial aid or merit scholarships has only increased given that our costs are increasing every year. But the introduction of the new FAFSA created quite the stress storm for us and for families last year, and it's kind of continuing a little bit this year.
I'll add that now the decision process has changed in terms of how students are being informed about whether or not they can be admitted to institutions. There are direct admit programs now here in the state of Tennessee. Your students can know whether they're going to be guaranteed admission to any of the University of Tennessee system campuses before they've even applied based on their academic credentials. And in addition to that, institutions are creating more pathways to get to their schools if that's their destination, where they want to graduate from. It may not be where they start, but it may be where they finish and get their degree. So a lot of schools are trying to create more pathways besides just transferring in, but other ways that guarantee them admission to those institutions.
So a lot of you mentioned the testing landscape. So if your institution is test optional, could you speak to how that has impacted your application process? Like what percentage of students do you see that are applying test optional? Kind of speaking to the testing piece.
Yeah, I can kick this one off. So at Holy Cross, we've actually been test optional since 2005. So our policy is older than most of the students who are actually applying to Holy Cross. So no change recently. As it relates to just applications, roughly about 40% of our students do submit test scores, and we're very upfront about it. We say, look, if you don't believe your scores reflect your ability, don't send them. And then I tell students all the time, if a school says they're test optional, believe them, but that does not mean you shouldn't do your due diligence. Because in some instances, schools will say we're test optional, but we need test scores for potential scholarships, or we need test scores if we're looking for placement. And so there are some examples where you may still need to submit them, but all in all, I would say if the school says they're test optional, you really should believe them. And the other piece, again, is I always tell students, talk to the folks in your college office. They have connections. I mean, the fact you've got all of these folks here during this time of year says that they could reach out and call people to say, hey, should the student submit or not submit those scores?
Yeah, I would say we are an institution at Rhodes that made the switch to test optional as COVID hit and students didn't have access to testing, and then we have remained test optional as a permanent option for a number of reasons. Our counselors love it in the reading process. We love that that's not part of how we make decisions anymore. But I think what we have done as an industry, with so many colleges and universities taking up the coattails of the test optional train with COVID, is make things very confusing and stressful for y'all. Because I would agree, if someone says they're test optional, you should believe them. But then you get to the question, if you apply to 10 schools, you might have 6 different answers about whether you submit a score or don't. Your child may have a score that they are very, very proud of, and that does reflect their abilities. But depending on which school to which they apply, it may or may not be beneficial to them in the admission process. So in an effort to cut down on the stress in the admission process, I think we've done the absolute opposite. And I would echo the advice that that's why you have a college counseling team here. I still recommend an SAT and an ACT just to see which test format is the most comfortable, and it keeps your options open in case there are schools on the list that are test required or require for scholarships. But then figuring out whether that score enhances your application or fits in with the competitive nature of the applications at that school is something your college counseling team can certainly help you with.
And I'll add to that. I think test optional has become a confusing term. We're test optional at UAH. We've been since the pandemic. But when you hear test optional, you have to ask a lot of follow-up questions now. Well, is that really test preferred, or is that test flexible? And so that just makes it more confusing for your students, unfortunately. The other thing is, a public institution, our decision to be test optional is not our own. It's determined year by year by a board of trustees that governs our entire system. And so that does make it challenging and frustrating for students as well. You've probably seen many press releases about state systems reverting back to a test required policy, and that's because politics unfortunately do sometimes play into this, and so it's not always the institution's decision, particularly when it's a public institution, and that does make it harder for students.
Am I there? Again, reiterating that y'all come from a variety of different institutions, can you speak to what some of the most important factors you are considering when you review an application?
I'm happy to kick this one off because it also kind of works with the testing piece. So at Lehigh, and I'm sure many of my colleagues will echo this, we use what's called a holistic admissions review, which means that if you send it to us, we're going to consider it. The most important piece, and we actually surveyed our staff this year at our file reading training meeting, we're like, okay, who starts with the transcript? And everybody but 2 people raised their hand. So out of a staff of about 20, 18 of us start with the transcript because that is a student's foot in the door. That is the demonstration of their 4 years of effort and progress and their strengths and their talents and their areas of growth. And that's how they demonstrate to us most clearly that they will be academically successful. Nobody here on this panel, you will not find an admissions counselor that is interested in admitting a student who will not be academically successful. I don't care how good they are at name a sport. I don't care how beautifully they can sing an aria. None of us want to admit a student that's going to be struggling academically. So that is truly the most important piece. But in the holistic review, everything else matters. What they write their essay about, what they talk about in their supplemental responses, if that's even a requirement for that school, recommendation letters, extracurricular activities, leadership. And so with the testing piece, I describe your student as a pizza. We're all familiar with pizza, yes? Excellent. So how many slices is a pizza typically cut in? 8. Excellent. That's exactly right. What happens if you go out to your favorite pizza restaurant and you get 2 pizzas, 2 cheese pizzas, and you come home, you set them out, you say, dig in, and one of them is cut in 8 pieces, and one of them, the exact same pizza, is cut in 7 pieces. It's not a piece missing. It's just cut in 7 pieces. Do you panic? Do you scream? Do you freak out? No, it's just 7 pieces. So when you have testing, that's an 8-piece pizza. When you don't have testing, that's a 7-piece pizza. It's not that big of a deal. You can have it. You cannot have it, and it's still the same pizza. Your student is still the same human being if they submit testing or if they don't. So the holistic review is that pizza, right? And we're like, ooh, this piece has a lot of pepperoni, and this piece has less pepperoni, and this one's got an anchovy. Where did that come from? And so with each piece, we're like learning more about your student and how they're going to fit into our university and how they're going to benefit our community and how we can benefit them as a person who's, continuing to grow along their pathway.
I like the pizza. I haven't heard that before.
Feel free to steal it.
I'll just add, from a selective institution perspective, we need students to be not only academically competitive but also compelling. When you think about the number of students who are applying to selective schools that are admissible, I would say probably 70-75% of students who are applying to Holy Cross, they're admissible. There's no way we can admit every single student that's admissible, and so at the end of the day, we want students who will not only add to the academic environment, but just as important, the social environment as well. And so as you think about schools, don't just base it solely off of, all right, do the academic numbers match up? What else are those students bringing to some of those institutions as well?
Well said by both of my colleagues. I'll also add too, you will hear the words holistic review used a lot by institutions about their decision-making process. As at the University of Tennessee, as we have had to become more selective because of the volume of applications, we cannot admit everyone, and our applicant pool has become stronger. We have had to hone in on and weigh certain things more heavily, and so the academic profile, those academic pieces, the GPA, the test scores, the rigor of the course curriculum, the school profile, those things matter in that academic profile and way more than sometimes the extracurriculars do. But I will say, with reference to holistic review, we review holistically, meaning we look at everything your student submits with their application and in their application. But not always is the decision a holistic decision, because there are institutional priorities, there are programs, there's an infrastructure of where we want to make sure that the student we're admitting can be successful. We do not want to set them up to struggle. And so if it's student success programs, whatever it may be, sometimes there are test score minimums, subject score minimums that are required, sometimes set by the state in which the institution may reside. So just something to add to what was stated, that's all true.
And I'll give a plug for a session that's happening after this on demonstrated interest. It's something good to ask about each of the schools to which your children are applying, because in addition to the holistic review of their academic profile, their personal qualities, how they spend their time outside of class, the way they're described in their letters of recommendation, and the way they talk about themselves in their personal statement or essay, as we talked about how many applications there are, and that more students are applying to more schools, one of the ways that schools have tried to figure out how to make decisions among a pool of very talented students is giving consideration to those that they think are really interested in accepting the offer of admission. So demonstrated interest has over the years started to play a role in the reading process to help institutions figure out if 75% of our pool is admissible, who do we admit? And so you can learn more about demonstrated interest in a session after this.
Real quick, sorry. With demonstrated interest, in some ways over the last number of years, it's gotten somewhat of a negative connotation to it. And so I actually don't call it demonstrated interest anymore. I call it students doing their due diligence. And at the end of the day, if a student is truly interested in an institution, any level of interest, at some point or another, they're going to go to that website. They're going to, even if they can't get there in person, they're going to do a virtual interview or a virtual information session or a virtual tour. I mean, there's so much that students can do now, and in all of this, in some ways, I'll make COVID into somewhat of a positive. Pre-COVID, none of that was offered. None of us did anything for the most part from a virtual standpoint. COVID hits, within months, maybe weeks, we were all able to provide virtual interviews, presentations, information sessions. And so pre-COVID, students, in some ways, if they couldn't get to campus, it was really hard or a little bit more difficult for them to show some level of demonstrated interest. Now, if school comes to your high school, yeah, you can go to that. You can go visit. But again, you can go to their website. And so when students say, there's no way I could do any of the above, in my mind, if I see a student who's done none of the above, I'm wondering how well do they know my institution? Right? Because if you've not done any homework on my school, how do I know you're really going to be a good fit? And so last thing I'm going to do is do that student a disservice. But I also don't want to do our institution a disservice. The kid gets there and all of a sudden they say, wow, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Clay, I really appreciate you covering your bases as the University of Tennessee releases in-state decisions today at 7 p.m. So you did a good job explaining y'all's admissions process. So to keep us on schedule, one last question. We have a room full of eager parents who want to help their children. So what is the best piece of advice you could give to parents as they start this process?
I mean, we can, I guess, just go down the line. Find something else to talk about. In senior year, the temptation is going to be, how are your essays? How are your supplements? What about this? Should we go on tour here? Should we get in the car? Should we drive here? Where did Susie get in? I heard UT, release their decisions. How did everybody find something else? Watch a TV show together, read a book, learn more about Taylor Swift, whatever your kids are into. There is so much pressure to make this the only thing that your family is focused on. And I guarantee you there's so many other wonderful things that are going to happen during your student's senior year that you should be chatting and engaging with them about. And when you pull back a little bit and don't make that the primary dinner table conversation, that helps them kind of understand, no matter what happens, no matter where I go, I'm going to find a great home, I'm going to find a great place, and this is not the only thing that my parents care about right now.
Yeah, my advice is similar to that. Pick one day, one time a week to talk about the college search process. It's easier said than done. And so with our older son who went through this process fairly recently, literally every time I would see him, I'd want to talk about the college search process. I mean, every time. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, before soccer practice, after soccer practice. He's coming out the bathroom. Hey, how about the college search process? And at one point, my wife pulled me to the side and said, hey, I'm confident this is not the advice you give families. And she was right. And so because of that, we said we've got to take it down a notch. And so when we did this, where we set it up where we would talk about it one day a week, one time a week, the crazy part is he started reaching out to me more about the college search process. I was getting text messages. What about this school? What about that school? What about this school? And I'm like, no. But we were communicating at a much higher level. And so that would be my advice. Just one day, one time a week.
I would encourage you to think about your role in this process. If you think back to teaching your children to drive, if you've been lucky enough to go through that, when you're teaching your children to drive, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that your child was driving the car and that you were in the passenger seat. Okay? You don't teach your child to drive by driving and having them observe it. And you don't teach your child to drive by having them in the driver's seat and you're in the living room yelling out instructions. Okay? So it is the name of it, coach, mentor, support person, however it works within the dynamic of your relationship. But keep in mind, they should be sitting in the driver's seat, and you are right there in case you need to grab the wheel, so that you can give instructions on maybe it's time to slow down before you make this right turn or what have you. But let this be their process, because at the end of the day, they are going to be the ones that show up at the college. And often there will be places that you think are perfect for them, and when they go visit, they're not perfect for them. And so keeping in mind that there are times that you're going to need to take the wheel, things like financial aid, maybe some of the extensive travel planning, but this really should be their process. And I couldn't agree more with timing, how often you bring it up.
You don't need to come to my session now. The parent guardian section, she covered that. It definitely is, a support process. So yes, the back seat analogy, still be there. You're still connected and involved, but be behind them, be in the shadows, let them be out front. But I will say, so I have a senior right now going through this process, and while I have intentionally stayed out of it because of my role and because he had applied to my institution and really it's where he wants to go, I've let his mom spend all the time with him traveling and exploring all the different options, because we did make him go and look at all the different types of schools. And in doing so, it was quite an adventure, and I think he enjoyed getting to see all the different types of schools and the places in which these schools exist and are located, and how the programs differ. Even though he has his sights set on a particular area of study, how it's offered and done at different institutions will vary. And so, but that time that he has spent with his mom traveling around, I know that is time that he will always cherish. And so whoever it is, enjoy the adventure, enjoy the journey of exploring, and start now. Don't wait until senior year. You definitely start now.
I had some advice that was given to me when I was a new admissions counselor that I try to share with new counselors that I work with. There's no such thing as a college admissions emergency. This is an important process, absolutely. There are times where it is helpful for students to act with some sense of urgency, but college admissions is never emergent. We're not doctors. We're not firefighters. We're not police officers. All we are trying to do is help students get to college. And if students do what they need to do, and even if they don't, they're probably going to be okay. I mean, someone student here in the room is going to miss a deadline. I hate to break that to you all. I don't know who, but someone. And it'll be fine. They'll be fine. They'll end up somewhere. They'll have a great experience. They will be okay. So just encourage you not to always think that everything is a crisis, because it's not. Students are going to be okay.
Your counselors will appreciate that advice, too. Yes. Very much.
That's why they brought me here.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Okay, well, can we give a round of applause to our lovely panelists? And I know you can tell that these individuals are dynamic and fabulous. I know you're so excited about their sessions now. We do have 4 other college reps that are doing a panel with our students. So all that to say, we have 9 reps here who are doing fantastic presentations. And so if you came with a partner, if your student is here, don't feel like you need to go to every session together. Please divide and conquer, because there is so much valuable information that you can learn tonight. And so please take advantage of that and split up and try to go to as many sessions as possible. And Catherine sent out an email to parents that has a link to the program. That should be in your email. We also have QR codes scattered throughout the pack, which will bring up the program and show you where each presentation is happening. They are all on 3 floors of the pack. There's only one, I think, on the first floor, but the majority are on the second and third floor. You will see sign-in sheets. Those are not for y'all. Those are just for your students. We don't need y'all to sign in. Please stay for all 3 sessions. Again, there's so much good information that you can learn tonight, so we hope you will stay for all 3 and take full advantage of that. We also have snacks available. As you walk around the pack, feel free to grab a snack. Just please don't bring it into the room. The crinkling of papers can be a little distracting. At 7:30, we are whisking them away to dinner. And I know that you have probably been like, God, I would love to talk to this individual more about their school, my student. That is not for tonight. And so at 7:30, we will be very rude and tell you to please let them go, because we are getting them out the door for a dinner reservation. Your students have been invited to join them and say hi at breakfast tomorrow morning at 8:20. So you are more than welcome to text your student to remind them to go to breakfast to say hello to these reps. But at 7:30, we wrap the show up and they are out the door. Anything else that I'm forgetting? All right. With that being said, we will dismiss, and y'all can head to the pack and figure out what sessions you're attending.